This week, Tucker Carlson interviewed Vladimir Putin in Russia. The mainstream media lost their minds and called him a traitor. We're going to explain the entire controversy this week on Wolves and Finance. When Tucker Carlson announced his interview with Putin, Hillary Clinton went on the news and had this to say.
Tucker Carlson is in Moscow right now interviewing Vladimir Putin.
Right.
The first American, I'll say, journalist to interview Putin since the war in Ukraine began. What does that tell you about Tucker Carlson and right-wing media and also Vladimir Putin?
Well, it shows me what I think we've all known. He's what's called a useful idiot. I mean, why are certain Republicans throwing their lot in? Why are, other Americans basically believing Putin? Why did Trump believe Putin more than our 11 intelligence agencies?
I don't know. Do you have a working theory?
I do have a working theory.
I want to make sure you understand what Hillary Clinton is talking about here. When she says that Trump sided with Putin over U.S. intelligence agencies, she is saying that Russia rigged the vote against her in 2016. She is referring to a press conference Trump gave when he was president in 2018. At the time, the FBI was running an investigation into whether the 2016 election was impacted by Russia. Trump said in a press conference, "President Putin says it's not Russia. I don't see any reason why it would be." So now Hillary Clinton is saying that Trump should have sided with the FBI instead of Putin. Isn't that making Hillary Clinton an election denier? She is saying the election was stolen from her. Isn't she doing the exact same thing they are arresting and prosecuting Donald Trump for right now? It's a little hypocritical for Hillary Clinton to go on the news and make the claim that the 2016 election was stolen from her. She knows this is a lie. It has been absolutely proven that Russia had nothing to do with Hillary's loss in 2016. In fact, the allegation that Russia was involved came from a report that was funded by Hillary Clinton's campaign. We know this from the 300-page Durham report. It has been extensively reported on by the news. Hillary Clinton knows it's a lie to say that the 2016 election was stolen from her by Russia. What is even more disturbing is that this journalist also knows it's a lie, and they are sitting together laughing about it.
Why did Trump believe Putin more than our 11 intelligence agencies?
I don't know. Do you have a working theory?
I do have a working theory.
How is this journalism? Please leave a comment down below if you can explain this to me, because I just don't get it. Tucker Carlson is the first Western journalist to interview Putin since the war in Ukraine began. How do these people have any standing to criticize him for this? Tucker Carlson went to Russia and posted this video claiming that the Biden White House was trying to interfere with their interview.
Almost 3 years ago, the Biden administration illegally spied on our text messages and then leaked the contents to their servants in the news media. They did this in order to stop a Putin interview that we were planning. Last month, we're pretty certain they did exactly the same thing once again, but this time we came to Moscow anyway.
The White House was then asked why they were interfering with Tucker Carlson's interview.
Tucker Carlson is in Moscow and just confirmed that he's going to be interviewing Russian President Vladimir Putin. He argues that Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in. Carlson contended in his preview video that the Biden administration has opposed and even attempted to hinder his attempts to interview Putin.
Wait, say that last part again?
He said that the Biden administration has allegedly attempted to prevent him from interviewing Vladimir Putin. Do you have a comment on either the interview or that allegation?
Absolutely not.
And for the board,
Absolutely not a comment, or absolutely not that didn't happen?
Absolutely not a comment, to be more clear, period.
Excuse me? No comment? That's not good enough. This is Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary for the White House. Why can't she say, no, we are not interfering? The government is required by the Constitution to never interfere with the press. It is in the very First Amendment of the Constitution. The government cannot hinder the press in any way. In this case, Tucker Carlson is saying they are trying to stop him from doing an interview. That is illegal. Why can't Karine Jean-Pierre say the words, "The government is not interfering in any way with Tucker Carlson's interview"? Then the attacks against Tucker became more extreme. Multiple members of the EU Parliament have called for sanctions against Tucker Carlson, including banning him from traveling to Europe. Then Tucker's interview was added as a reason for him to be included on a kill list in Ukraine. To be fair, Tucker Carlson was already on the kill list for negative comments he made about Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky last year. Ukraine says that the government does not technically own this website, but we do know that Ukrainian secret services reportedly works on running the website. It does not matter if the government owns it or not, if they're still running it. I want to show the website to you because I don't think people understand how extreme this is. When you go to the website, for some reason, you see Mark Milley, the former U.S. chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Why is the U.S. military at the top of this Ukrainian website? As you scroll down, you see pictures of dead soldiers, which are too graphic to show on YouTube. Then you see a graphic that says, "Terror Russia, soon in every country with Russian-speaking immigrants." This sounds like it's talking about genocide, not just in Ukraine, but in other countries as well. You can use this website to search for people on the kill list. Here we see the profile for Tucker Carlson. They describe him as helper of the Russian invaders and terrorists. You can see that it shows the date of birth and a blank space for date of liquidation. This is a massive violation of human rights, and the US has chastised Ukraine in the past for this website. You cannot have a website run by government employees with a kill list where you include journalists when they say anything against the government. That is a violation of human rights. Shouldn't the White House be calling this out? Why are they saying nothing after an American journalist is put on a kill list in Ukraine? I think it's important to put all of this in context. How did we get here? In 2014, Joe Biden was vice president. His son Hunter Biden was placed on the board of a Ukraine oil company called Burisma. Hunter Biden was paid $1 million per year, even though he had no experience in the oil industry. In total, the Biden family received $6.5 million from Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian prosecutor Viktor Shokin was investigating corruption by Burisma, Hunter Biden's company. In 2015, Vice President Joe Biden traveled to Ukraine, where he demanded that prosecutor Shokin be fired as a condition of a $1 billion loan by the United States.
I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Congress is currently investigating this as potential corruption by Joe Biden in Ukraine. What is really telling is the White House is refusing to hand over early drafts of Joe Biden's speech when he traveled to Ukraine in 2015. The drafts would show whether Joe Biden changed U.S. policy on the plane ride to Ukraine in order to benefit his son. Also interesting, do you remember the classified documents that Joe Biden illegally kept in his garage next to his Corvette? It turns out that some of them were related to Ukraine during this same time period. So far, the FBI has also refused to turn over these documents to Congress. Why is everyone trying so hard to keep this information secret? Fast forward to when Joe Biden becomes president. Russia invades Ukraine in 2022. Under Joe Biden, the U.S. has given Ukraine more than $75 billion. The big question is, if there was corruption by Joe Biden in Ukraine, is Zelensky blackmailing Joe Biden? If Zelensky has proof that Joe Biden was corrupt, could that be a reason why Joe Biden keeps pushing to give so many U.S. taxpayer dollars to Ukraine? Now there are all these attacks against Tucker Carlson. Is the concern over Tucker Carlson really about covering up Joe Biden's corruption? The people in charge might not want anyone to hear any perspective against Ukraine, because that would make it difficult to send Ukraine more money, and then proof against Joe Biden might be revealed. So what did Putin say in Tucker Carlson's interview? It was a long 2-hour interview, so I'm going to summarize it for you. Putin basically made 3 main points. The war was a legitimate regional dispute. Do not mess with BRICS nations. Russia is open to a peace treaty. Let's start with the first point. The first 40 minutes of the interview was Putin giving a history of Ukraine. He was doing this as a way to legitimize the conflict as a small regional dispute of Russians against Russians. He emphasized that Ukraine used to be Russia, and so they are in the right to take back their own land. I have to point out that this was a lie. You need to remember that Putin is a politician, and he lies just like every other politician. Only this was a big lie. One of the most defining moments in Ukraine's history was a 2-year period from 1932 to 1933, when Stalin starved the people of Ukraine. This is known as the Holodomor. Millions of Ukrainians were starved to death. This didn't happen that long ago. Just to be clear, Russia took the food from the people of Ukraine and gave it to the people living in Russia. Don't you think if your family members died a horrible death at the hands of Russia, you would be a little upset with them? So for Putin to spend 40 minutes giving the history of Ukraine and not mention the little detail when Russia starved the entire country to death, I find that to be misleading. He is lying, just like any other politician trying to make you think he's a good guy. It is also relevant that he invaded a foreign country. This is not a regional dispute between Russians. He invaded a foreign country. You can't do that. Now, Putin does make an interesting point. He gives us one justification for invading Ukraine as denazification. He points out that Ukraine is one of the only places in the world that celebrates and promotes Nazis. During World War II, Ukraine had the largest population of Jewish people in Europe, estimated at 2.7 million people. More than half were killed during the war, including in one of the largest killing sites outside of Auschwitz. Even though the current president of Ukraine, Zelensky, is Jewish, anti-Semitism is still a major problem in Ukraine today. In my entire life, I have never known a Nazi. I have never seen a Nazi until Joe Biden became president. Why is it that since Joe Biden became president, we have seen Nazis popping up everywhere? Here's a photograph of the Azov battalion in Kiev. You can see the Nazi SS displayed on their flags. Here's an interview with Nazi Kent Boneface McClellan, who admits he's working for the US CIA in Ukraine.
There's a lot of hype about the FBI sending me over there, but that's not the FBI that does that. It was Central Intelligence that got me involved in that.
Here are photographs of a Ukrainian Nazi named Sergei Dibinin. He was at the protests on January 6. Strangely enough, he has never been placed on the FBI's wanted list. Why is that? That suggests to me that this Nazi was working for the US government. Canada's parliament gave a standing ovation to a former World War II Nazi from Ukraine. The current Deputy Prime Minister of Canada is Chrystia Freeland. It turns out that her grandfather was also a Nazi from Ukraine, in the same division as the man who received a standing ovation. I will repeat, the grandfather of the current Deputy Prime Minister of Canada is a Nazi. She has confirmed this herself. In the US, the largest donor to the Democrat Party is someone named George Soros. He gave $179 million to Democrats in 2021 to 2022. George Soros, who is Jewish, collaborated with the Nazis during World War II to confiscate the property of other Jews.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt.
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, and here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I should be there. None of that.
Well, of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one from whom the thing is being taken away. But there was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was, well, actually, funny way, it's just like in markets, that if I weren't there, of course, I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. In other words, whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator. The property was being taken away. So I had no role in taking away that property. So I had no sense of guilt.
The head of the World Economic Forum is Klaus Schwab. His father lived in Ravensburg, near the border between Switzerland and Nazi Germany. He was a commercial director at the Escher Weiss factory, which likely employed forced labor from a Nazi camp during the war. Fact checkers will dispute this and argue whether this was technically a concentration camp. But whether or not Klaus Schwab's father was operating a concentration camp, it is clear he was working with the Nazis. Now, I understand that we cannot hold someone responsible for the actions of their father or grandfather. But we have to acknowledge that it is strange that all of these Nazis are popping up everywhere. And it is strange that it started happening when Joe Biden became president. And why are the Nazis all working for the Democrat Party? In the second part of the interview, Putin threatened that the West should not mess with the BRICS nations. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Specifically, Putin talked about how the US dollar was failing and people are going to start using the BRICS currency. This is a fear tactic and another big lie. I talk with a lot of bankers. No smart banking executive is taking their banking deposits and moving them from US dollars to Chinese yuan. I don't know if you've been following the Chinese real estate market, but the Chinese economy is collapsing. Despite the economic problems in the US, the US dollar is still the reserve currency in the world, and a currency backed by the Chinese yuan does not look very reliable. The important takeaway from this section is Putin's threat. It is important to understand that Putin is not our friend. He is actively working with China and Iran. They have described their alliance in many speeches and reports as a new world order, with the BRICS nations as the leaders of the world. There is a reason that NATO has missiles pointed at Russia. Russia has nuclear weapons pointed at the US. Do not forget that Putin is actively working against the interests of the United States. The third section of the interview is that Russia is open to a peace treaty. This was the bombshell moment of the interview. Putin explained that there is currently a peace treaty that is ready to be signed. This is not some frivolous gesture of peace. Putin held up his hand like this, showing how thick the peace treaty was. This is a detailed document with terms the Russians and Ukrainians had worked on together. This corroborates reports from the news media of a peace deal being reached last year and then abandoned after pressure on Ukraine from Western nations. This raises a big question. Why is the US funding this war? If the Russians and Ukrainians are ready to make peace, why are we stopping them? Why do we keep sending our US taxpayer dollars to Ukraine? And could it have anything to do with Zelensky blackmailing Joe Biden with evidence of corruption? This is not our war. Why is the US giving them our money? I do have to give Putin credit in this interview because he's a very good politician. Putin came to power in 1999, and you don't remain dictator of Russia for 24 years unless you're a good politician. There was one question that really showed how sharp he is. Tucker Carlson asked him about his religion. Now, Putin describes himself as an Orthodox Christian. Tucker asks, how can you be a Christian and kill people in war? This is a hard question, and I think most US politicians would not have an answer. But Putin, without any hesitation, said, it's very easy. We're defending ourselves and our way of life. That was a good answer. It was a lie, but a good answer. And I think this is a good reflection of the overall interview. Putin invaded another country. I don't know how you can describe an invasion as defending yourself, but that is how Putin describes it, and it sounds really good. That is why he's such a good politician. Unfortunately, in the entire 2-hour interview, no one ever mentioned what was actually going on. The war in Ukraine is about oil. Russia wanted access to the oil routes through Ukraine. Even with the war going on, Russia transports enormous amounts of oil through Ukraine to Europe. Oil makes up 16% of Russia's GDP. In contrast, oil makes up only 8% of US GDP. Oil is a huge driver for the Russian economy, and Ukraine is the corridor to make that money. Russia saw Joe Biden as a weak leader and used the opportunity to invade Ukraine. No one is saying any of this, but in my opinion, oil is the main motivation for this war. It is the same thing as when the US invaded Iraq. We did it for the oil. No one will admit that, but in my opinion, oil was the primary motivation. So I think there was a lot of spin in this interview. But for me, there was one major positive takeaway. Can the US please stop sending money to Ukraine? Now I want to hear from you. Do you think that it was fair that Tucker Carlson received so much hate for interviewing Putin? Let me know in the comments down below. And make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos. If you like these videos, consider signing up for a monthly membership on my website, wolvesandfinance.com. For $6 a month, you help me to keep putting out these videos. I'm Zach from Wolves and Finance. Thank you for watching.